There it is. Okay then. So we're ready to start the meeting. There's a couple of things to say at the start is if all members could keep the cameras on throughout the meeting. If you don't want to be visible on the recording, you are able to turn your camera off. But if you have any technical difficulties during the meeting, sometimes it also helps to turn your camera off. If you could keep all your microphones on mute and only unmute when you're going to make a contribution to the meeting, please. Please excuse those noises. That's the rest of the parent network jumping in and giving me information. Attendees wishing to contribute should click on the hands up button on the control bar, and it should notify me that someone wishes to speak. 90% of the time I will miss that because I've got 3 other things going on, but I know that Councillor Aldworth is here and I know that she will keep a close eye on those hands going up and down. So she will prompt me if I miss anyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Voluntary Sector Liaison Committee meeting. As you've already heard, this meeting is being recorded and it'll be made available to view via the Council's website, except for any discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images of those individuals present and or speaking will be publicly available to all via the website. If members lose connection during the meeting, please make every attempt to reconnect, and we will continue with the meeting as long as we are still quorate. And I'm sure that Rebecca will keep me on track with all of that. So if we can start with agenda item number 1 and ask for any apologies of absence that you may have received, please, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from absence from Councillor John Bevan, Councillor David Haas, Councillor Teresa Parry, Councillor Diane Price, Councillor Lynette Stenner, Councillor Walter Williams. And then on the voluntary sector side, is our Oakdale Community Centre your Chair? Can I just double check that?
I can't see them.
Okay, we've had apologies from them. And Combat Partners, we've had apologies from Gwent Police and South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any? Sorry, Roger. Does anyone else have any?
Just to report, I'm present and correct from Oakdale Community Centre.
Sorry, Roger. Yes, of course you are.
Yep.
Can we take that back off? Roger is here. I told you I'm unreliable. Apologies. Is there any other apologies need to be given from the floor? No? Okay. Could I hand over now then to Rebecca to call the roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Aldworth.
Present.
Apologies on Councillor Bevan. Councillor Collis.
Present.
I think we've had a apology. Councillor Everidge.
Present.
Councillor Fussell.
Emma.
Councillor Goff.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor June Gale, I believe, has given apologies. Apologies on Councillor Haas. And also Piers, Councillor Higgs has given apologies. Apologies from Councillor Parry, Councillor Price, Councillor Stenner. Councillor Whittle.
I did see Councillor Whittle. I don't know where he's gone.
I think he's there, Chair. I think he might be in trouble with his microphone.
No problem.
That's right. Sorry, apologies. I'm the area. Had I, Emma, my microphone was muted. Sorry. It's nice to keep me quiet, though, isn't it?
I didn't want to be the one to say that.
Thanks, Councillor Whittle. We've also had apologies from Councillor Walter Williams. If we move on to our Garble representatives, Stephen Tiley.
Present.
Alison Palmer.
I'm here.
Thank you. And Gina Jones.
Present.
Thank you. So if we move on to our voluntary sector reps chair, Abertrader Community Church. Barod Cymru. Blaenau Gwent and Caerphilly Care and Repair. Caerphilly and Blaenau Gwent Citizens Advice Bureau. Crews in Gwent. Brunwork Wales.
Present.
Thank you. Homestart Cymru. Minton Eith Caerphilly.
Yeah, dwi yma, I'm here.
Thank you. Oakdale Community Centre.
Present.
Thank you. Pobl Housing. Right from the start. SSAFA Gwent Branch. The Parent Network.
Yes, I'm here.
United Reformed Church. Youth Centre Henguide. Kevin Henguide.
Presennol.
Thank you. And Vanguard. And Compact Partners Chair, Aneurin Bevan, Health Board.
We am I'm here, David Llewellyn from IWN, so I'm Aneurin Bevan.
Thank you. I think we've had apologies from Gwent Police, the Commissioner's Office, apologies NRW, and apologies from the Fire and Rescue Service. Apologies from the Business Forum, I believe. And the Town and Community Council representative may be attendance, but he has a prior appointment, so maybe joining late. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rebecca. That's brilliant. Thank you to everyone then who has taken their time out of their day to come along to the meeting today. Thank you very much. We'll move on to declarations of interest, and I have to read this little paragraph out. So, councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Please use the hands up function to indicate if you have a declaration. Lovely, I'll take that as clear then. So move on to item number 3 is to receive and consider the minutes of the Voluntary Sector Liaison Committee held on the 17th of June. So does everyone have access to the minutes, please? Yeah. So if we go through for accuracy first, so page 1. Page 2, page 3, and page 4. And then can we go back through them for matters arising? So page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Could we receive those as an accurate, I don't know the right words to use, as an accurate representation of the last meeting, please?
Move, Chair.
Thank you. Can we have someone to second?
Councillor Collins here. I will second. I agree with all of the issues on there.
Thank you very much. That's brilliant. So can you record that for us, please, Rebecca?
Sorry, Chair, could I just ask you to ask the committee to take a show of hands, please, to show they're in agreement with the minutes. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Can you show us our hands? Does that look okay to you, Rebecca?
Yes, Chair, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on now then to item number 4, which is the Community Empowerment Fund. And we have a verbal update from Vicky Doyle. Are you there, Vicky?
Yes, I'm here. So it's going
Thank
to be
you.
a presentation.
All right.
So if you bear with me a second, I'll just load up the presentation for you.
Thank you very much.
I'll just share my screen. Doesn't work. What's going on? Sorry, for some reason it's refusing to load.
I see it.
You see it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I don't think it's sharing properly though. Bear with me a second.
I can see your minute.
Currently, we can see your agenda and minutes.
Yeah, it's sharing the wrong screen. It is. That should be the presentation now. Is that okay?
Yeah, I can see that.
Sorry, it's not letting me. Come on. Okay. Okay, so thanks for asking me to give you this little introduction to the Community Empowerment Fund this morning. As most of you will know, my name is Vicky Doyle. I'm a policy officer with Caerphilly Council. So I'll just kind of carry on with the presentation. So what we're going to be talking to you about today. So the purpose of the session is to give you an overview of the new Community Empowerment Fund that's recently been introduced. Talk about the criteria for the fund and the process, the role of elected members and how we are hoping they will engage with their communities, support that might be available to organisations that wish to apply, and there will be an opportunity at the end to ask any questions. If I could ask you to hold the questions until the end. Okay, so where has the Community Empowerment Fund sort of come from? So you'll remember, I think it was the end of last year or early this year, we undertook a Caerphilly Conversation survey with local residents, and basically the Community Empowerment Fund has come about purely through that feedback. So in that survey, one of the questions asked whether respondents thought it was a good idea that a community budget is made available to local communities to enable them to do more for themselves, and 78% of respondents agreed with that. And then 89% of respondents also agreed that such initiatives would encourage communities to take a greater pride in their area. So it's all been informed by, as I said, a Caerphilly Conversation and input from local residents. So the Community Empowerment Fund has an annual budget, if you like, of £328,000, and that is to support community-led initiatives that complement those provided through public services. So it's not intended to replace any services that the public services in the area should be providing, but it's very much those community-led initiatives that will help complement those. So the way the funding has been allocated is to split it effectively into 73 and have an allocation per elected member. And it results in an allocation equivalent to 4490 per elected member per ward. Now, in practice, what this means is that if you have a single member ward, then obviously the allocation for that ward will just be the 4490. However, we do have a number of multi-member wards across the county borough, and they can decide, and it's purely within their sort of gift to decide whether they pool that money and potentially fund larger projects. So, for example, if you had a 3-member ward, they could pool the 4490 per ward member and have a budget, a combined amount of almost 15,000. But that's very much their choice, and they will have to decide that between the members of a particular ward. So what is the aim of the scheme? it's basically to support communities to build capacity within the community and enable communities to better understand their own local priorities. You know, we want this fund to be used to provide the things that the local community wants, and to be involved in how this money is spent. It's to make good use of existing assets. So we know that the County Borough has lots of assets, whether that be the environment, buildings, you know, groups that are out there, but it's to support them, you know, it's to support local community to help them support themselves. It's to increase participation among harder to reach individuals. You know, we all know that there are pockets within our communities that are harder to reach than others, so perhaps help with some of that. And another key thing is to develop sustainable community projects. You know, we don't want to fund something that in a year or two is going to disappear. You know, we want these projects to be sustainable in the long term, and continue to sort of support the local community it's designed to help. So what sort of projects can be funded? And again, when we did the consultation, the Caerphilly conversation, as you can imagine, there were a whole range of things that people had suggested, or projects that people suggested, types of projects. And these were kind of put into these kind of overall categories. They are meant to be suitably broad enough to enable, obviously, the groups applying to, you know, fit their project into one of these categories. So hopefully it will cover kind of the vast majority of things that people might want to do. So you can see the list there of items that, or types of projects that can be funded. So excuse me, environmental projects, projects supporting community cohesion, projects to tackle loneliness and isolation, digital inclusion, projects encouraging physical and mental well-being, activities for young people, although I should note that that's not anything that's considered statutory provision. So anything that, you know, for example, the local authority should provide won't be covered under that. Projects that encourage community safety, and a key one there is developing community groups. Why that's key, I'll come on to in a little while. So what sort of things can't we fund? So unfortunately, we can't fund any ongoing running costs of organisations. That's not what this fund is intended to do. So things like rent, utilities, that kind of thing won't be eligible. One exception to this is newly formed groups. Those groups that have started up within the 6 months prior to application. And if it's that kind of group, we can potentially support startup costs. Any subsequent grants for the same project or activity. So we can fund the same group, but we can't fund the same project or activity on an ongoing basis. So just to bear that in mind, you know, it is kind of one-off funding in that sense. So any further future applications would need to be for different activity or different projects. And we can't fund any retrospective projects. So where costs have already been incurred, where things have already been purchased, we wouldn't be able to fund those costs either. So in terms of the type of organisations who can apply, already mentioned about those groups that are new groups and those groups just starting out. And we will be able to help those. And as I said, I'll provide a bit more detail later. But any groups, so perhaps tenants and residents groups, or local football club, or any type of group that maybe doesn't have a formal constitution, but has some rules that have been agreed by the members, they would be eligible to apply, as would kind of voluntary organisations, your charities or charitable incorporated organisations, which is obviously the new form of charity, and then certain types of social enterprise. So basically, those social enterprises that, or where the sort of the profits from any activity go back into the organisation and are not taken out and paid to directors or shares or that type of thing. So all the profits have to be reinvested in the organisation or projects that organisation is undertaking. And the key thing there is that the organisations must have a bank account in their own name. One of the things we often get asked is, can we pay the money to an individual? In some of the other grant schemes I ran, can we pay to an individual? Can we pay to a third-party organisation? And the answer is no. It has to go through the bank account of an organisation in its own name. So when can application be submitted? So with this one, it's a little bit different because obviously we are expecting quite a large number of applications due to the way the sort of funding has been split up. So the closing date for the first round is the 31st of October this year. That is a Sunday. So what I would say is we will accept applications up until that date. We are still homeworking in the sort of vast majority at the moment. So we will accept applications, preferably by email because it's easier to kind of process them. And we will expect them right up until that date. So plenty of time to, for organisations to think about their projects and obviously to put an application together. Whether we have subsequent funding rounds in the current financial year is difficult to say at the moment. I'm expecting that we probably will have at least another round, but it will depend on what funding is allocated on a ward-by-ward basis. So as I said earlier, single member wards, they might have a project come in that uses up all the funding in that first round. So what that would potentially mean is that only certain wards that still have funding available would be able to apply in subsequent rounds. So if the allocation is sort of gone in one go, that's it until the kind of next financial year. Excuse me. So applicants will be informed of the outcome hopefully in around 6 to 8 weeks, but obviously that depends on the number of applications, because as you can imagine, if we get one application from every ward member or via every ward member, then that's 73 before you start. So we are expecting quite a high volume of applications to come in, but they will be, applicants will be informed of the process as we go along. So how much can be applied for? As I've said a few times before, the maximum for any organisation that they can apply for is 4490, unless obviously the ward members in a particular ward have agreed between them to pool their allocations. So it'll depend on very much on a case-by-case basis on what has been agreed locally. You can apply for as sort of funding towards large projects. One of the questions that has come up a couple of times so far is, can community councils match fund these grants? And obviously the answer is yes. They wouldn't be eligible in their own right to apply, but they would be able to match fund projects. And obviously then, as I said, larger projects would need to find additional funding from other sources, whether that be other grant funds, other, the organisation's own, perhaps reserves or money they have in the bank or whatever. So they would need to have seek that additional funding from other sources if necessary. Where we have a situation where we get more applications in than funding available in a particular ward, obviously we would involve the ward members in prioritising those applications and helping us to decide how that funding is split up. It may be we offer less money to a particular group, or we may fund one group and not another, but obviously again it'll be a case-by-case basis, and we don't really know at this point whether that will be an issue, but obviously because members will be sponsoring these bids, then obviously they have a role. They should be aware of the bids that are coming through in their award. So hopefully we won't have that situation arise too much. An application should be for a minimum amount of £1,000. This is obviously due to the sort of size of the pot and the potential for applications to come in. One of the things, I'll cover that later, don't worry, I'll speak about that later, bear with me a sec, sorry. Okay, so in terms of payments and timescales, this is slightly different to the other community grants that we run, and for this scheme only, an agreement has been reached that we can pay 50% on approval, with the remaining 50% on receipt of the necessary financial records. This is in recognition that obviously some groups do find it difficult to fund things up front. So we'll still need all the evidence of the spend, that obviously the money has been spent in the way it was outlined on the application form. And you know, we need to note that this does represent a significant risk for the authority. So, you know, it is an agreement that's been reached with Cabinet. So, you know, as I say, it'll be 50% on approval. So if you have an application that's £2,000, we would release that £1,000 on approval. But obviously we wouldn't release any further grant until the evidence has been provided, which is kind of, you know, invoices, receipts, bank statements, showing the spend has been occurred, and then obviously we release the remaining amount. All expenditure will need to be evidenced. So even when that second tranche of money is released, we will still need the evidence provided that the money has been spent as detailed. And if we don't receive that evidence, we could potentially seek to reclaim the funding if the evidence is not provided. All projects have to be completed within 18 months of approval. So elected members have a significant role to play in this fund. As I said earlier, we are looking for individual elected members to sponsor applications from groups. And there is a space on the application form for elected members, for groups to tell us what elected member they've been working with, and also, you know, if there's any declaration of interest to be made by the members, you know, if they're a member of the committee of that group, etc., they will need to state that on the form. But they will also need to engage with their communities and talk to their communities about the projects that the communities want. So it's a really important role for members in this project or this scheme. And only bids with support from the relevant elected member will be taken forward. So any bids that come in that don't have that support, then they'll automatically won't be progressed. So as I said earlier, we recognise that you know, not every organisation is a group currently with, you know, the bank account and everything else. And also there are going to be certain groups that are not going to want to set up as a group. I'll touch on that in a second, but there's a list there of the type of support that is available. I noticed at the last meeting you had a presentation from Caerphilly Cares, so you should be aware of the support that Caerphilly Cares can provide, and obviously Garvo as well. But these are the type of things that, you know, they can help with. So forming a community group or charity, making sure the organisation runs effectively, organise events and community projects, accessing funding, financial management, drawing up a constitution. So there is the support out there for those organisations that aren't currently established. And this is one of the aims of this scheme, is to, you know, try and set up these new groups so that they are set up properly, they operate properly, etc. And the support is there to enable them to do that. One of the things that's come up when we've been doing some consultation with members over the last couple of weeks is that so for example, in the current situation with COVID, you've got lots of groups that have sprung up over Facebook, you know, to support the local community, that won't necessarily want to set up as a group in their own right, but would still like to access the funding. So the advice that we've given on that is that we suggest that they link up with an existing group in the community and ask that group to be the parent, if you like, and apply for funding on their behalf. They would still have to meet all the other criteria, and obviously, you know, the parent organisation effectively would have to be responsible for all the sort of financial management side of things, and they would obviously have to meet that £1,000 minimum criteria. So you know, that's something that has been raised, and that's kind of how we suggest that groups could go around that issue. Just to mention as well, that £1,000 can be made up of a number of different things. So for example, if we had a litter picking group that might need some equipment, for example, obviously that is highly likely to reach the £1,000 threshold, but they could obviously, ask for some other things as well, say maybe a bench to make a sitting area, or to plant some trees, or any other things that they might want to do locally that might improve the area for residents. So there's lots of ways and means of doing it. Best thing they can do is speak to us, and we can give them advice on how to go about that type of thing. So obviously contact details, we have set up a special or a sort of inbox for this particular grant scheme, so cef@caerphilly.gov.uk. So if I could ask you to use that grant scheme, that inbox, myself and Hayley Lancaster will be checking in on that regularly, and it'll just make it easier than having applications and queries and things going into one place rather than to us as individuals. So if you can publicise that sort of inbox and ask people to use that one where possible. For those non-constituted groups who want to access the community fund, as I said earlier, there are sort of organisations that can help, Caerphilly Cares and obviously Garvo. So obviously, you'll know those contact details, so you can contact them for that assistance. And any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen because obviously I can see you then. So.
Thanks very much, Vicky. Can I just ask before we go to questions, are you going to be able to send us the presentation out so that we can share?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I can send it through to Rebecca and ask her to forward it on to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that. I saw hands flying up. I think Councillor Whitlock, I think you were first on my screen with a hand up. So would you like to go for it?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Vicky, for the presentation, which was, spot on from the point of view of what needs to be done. My concern is that lots of voluntary organisations haven't met very much at all during the last 18, 19, 20 months, whatever it is. And I represent a ward which has about 9 or 10 large and small estates, housing estates ranging between 250 to 500 to 1,000. And those are individual communities, and lots of people are involved in groups, but those groups don't actually meet within the housing estates where they live, because there are no facilities to meet in the housing estates where they live, and the children perhaps attend football or other, or rugby, whatever, other organisations outside of the ward. And I have ideas for a number of estates that I want to improve, but it's far too short a notice to, first of all, try and arrange a meeting, because people are still, and most of the people who do this voluntary work are the older community, and I class myself as that now, sadly. And they're rather reluctant to come to meetings at all. And in fact, some of the voluntary groups that I am a member of have noticed an amazing fall in the number of people wanting to help. I won't name them here because it's a public meeting and it's unfair on them, but some of the membership of those voluntary groups of older people are really struggling, and I'm very concerned about their future viability. And I just wonder how, I just think it's too short a notice to get these things in by. I can't organize things on 9, 10, 11 different estates, get people interested and get together all by the 31st of October. It's just not going to happen. And that worries me. And then what will happen then is the perhaps the groups that are well organized, and good luck to those, obviously, it'll be the same groups getting the same money, and that's what scares me about this. It's a fantastic idea, and I wholeheartedly back it, but it's too early during this pandemic, in my opinion. Sorry.
No, that's
What
fine.
can
I
we
mean,
do?
like I said, the 31st of October is just the first round. Obviously, you know, we had to have a cut-off date at some point. So that was the agreement that was reached. Obviously, if we don't get any applications in for your wards, then that money would still be there to be accessed in the next grant round. When that will be, I would say probably in the new year, probably maybe about February time. But obviously, like I said, until we run the first round, see what comes in, see what the allocations are, we can't sort of, you know, say that's hard and fast. I take your point about groups not meeting. I mean, you know, you could perhaps have virtual meetings. I don't know what the circumstances would be in your area. You know, there is a caveat with groups applying that if they have a grant, a bit similar to sort of the Welsh Church Fund arrangements currently, if you have a grant 1 year, then you couldn't have another grant in the following year. You'd have to wait 2 years effectively. So there is opportunity then that, you know, that the same groups don't get the funding all the time. And like I said, they would have to be for different projects as well. So, you know, you couldn't have one group applying for the same thing year in, year out, because, you know, that wouldn't be allowable. I take on board, like I said, that, you know, we are still in, you know, within the pandemic. So I take your point that, you know, it is difficult to set up new groups. But obviously, like I said, when the time does, this is an annual allocation. So when the time does come that people feel more able to meet up and discuss what they might want to do, etc., then that money will still be there and they'll still be able to access it.
Oh, sorry, just a quickie through you, Chair. Did you say the money will be carried over to next year for each ward?
The agreement that's been reached is that funding will be carried forward for 1 year. And then after that 1 year, if it's still there, it will go into a general pot that will be available right across the county borough, because, you know, a lot of you will remember the Area Forum budgets, and some wards will be very good at spending their allocation, you know, and some wards still have money left now, and that scheme closed a number of years ago. So we didn't want a situation where there's, you know, projects out there that we can't fund because it's in a ward that's spent all its allocation. So as I said, it will be ring fenced for 1 year. And then after that 1 year, if it's still remaining, it will go into that central pot potentially to be used in other areas.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Lowry was next, but I may be wrong. Lowry, do you want
think it was, yeah, I think Judith was before me.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Judith, please. Sorry, I missed the order there.
Okay. Yes. Well, this is very much Communities First part Mark II, isn't it? Because we had £10,000 a year to spend in our ward because we were a Community First ward. So we did some very valuable projects with it. Was match funding. What I want to know is if, for instance, we wanted something like I don't know, security cameras around the youth club, youth centre. Would we have to provide estimates? And how many?
Yeah. Off. Right, so it's not Communities First because this is council money. Communities First was obviously money that came from Welsh Government and was only available to Communities First areas. And obviously, as we know, vast areas within the county borough weren't in the Communities First programme. So this scheme is available county borough wide. Is available in every ward, so every ward can potentially benefit. So that's the first thing to note. Yes, you could potentially apply for security cameras if that was the agreement locally, if that was the priority. And we would need, it would depend on the costs, because similarly to the other grants, anything under costing in total, so the total project cost is less than 5,000, you'd need 2 quotes. Anything where the total project cost is over 5,000, you'd need 3. So again, it depends on the the overall value of what you wanted to do.
Thanks very much, Vicky. Can we move on to Laura? Are you okay with the answer, Judith? Is that all right with you?
Yes, I mean, it depends what it is, but sometimes it's very difficult to get 3 quotes. You know, it depends what if you, I mean, some building work, you know, I've had experience of that. Very difficult to get 3 quotes. So, okay, I mean, if that's the rule, it's the rule.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the rules that we have to use. You know, because like I said, it is council money. We have to show, you know, good value for money. You know, it's a public purse at the end of the day. So we have to have that evidence there to support what you want to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Laurie now, please.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, just a quick question to Vicky. If you're an organisation like my own who operate across the borough, are you able to submit more than one application at the same time for, you know, linked to different councillors? You know, for instance, if you wanted to develop a project and wanted to run it in more than one area, or even a different project in a different area?
I think we'd have to have a think about that one, because obviously we were looking at, it's designed to support more local community activity, if that makes sense. So it's very much looking at it from kind of grassroots up. So the way it was sort of intended was that it would be the local community groups that would apply, not organisations like yourselves that cover the whole county borough. So perhaps the best thing to do would be if there was a group based in a local ward, maybe they could make the application rather than yourselves, because like I said, it is designed to be very grassroots, hence why it's been split across the different wards.
Okay, even though we do work on that level currently.
I think so. I mean, it's something I can discuss, obviously, with colleagues, but that's how the grant scheme was designed, to be very grassroots, very locally based.
Can I jump in as well? Because Laurie, your question actually is very similar to the one that was in my head, because Parent Network has, I mean, when we're open and running, we've got up to 25 groups, and we've got new groups opening, you know, even during lockdown. And those groups are community-led, community-driven, run by the families. However, those families are very often the furthest away from becoming a constituted group that you could imagine, because their confidence isn't there and they're not ready. So to sort of mirror Laurie's comment, would it be possible for an organisation to support those individual grassroots groups to put a bid in, but also recognising that they wouldn't have a bank account and they wouldn't be in a position to manage that application in the first instance?
As I said, I'll take that back. We'll have some discussions on that, and I'll come back to you. That's probably the simplest, because like I said, it's been set up in a slightly different way to some of the other community grants. So it's not for me to say, yes, you'd be able to do that. I'll go back and check, and we'll come back to you.
That's really good. Thank you. Sorry to be a pain, but
no, that's fine.
When Laurie asked that question, it just resonated with the work that we do as well, and I think it's something we need to clarify. Thank you. Sorry for jumping in before you, Roger. Can I hand over to you now for your question?
Just unmuting. Yeah, 2 questions, if I may. How many applications have you had so far? And secondly, what's the current underspend on the Area Forum Fund, the small grant scheme, and the Welsh Church Fund? I think those are relevant.
Okay, so sorry, what was the first part of the question about?
How many applications have you received?
Right, okay, so we haven't had any applications in as yet. I have sent a number of applications out, and obviously all the application forms have been sent to members, because like I said, they will have a significant input into that. I can't comment on the ERI forum. It's not something I'm involved with, so I don't know what any balances might be left. I believe the lady that deals with those is called Bethan. I can't remember her surname offhand. The Welsh Church Fund and Grants of Voluntary Sector are ongoing budgets, so obviously they are open for applications. So, you know, within year we can't say what any underspend might be, because obviously it's still alive, at that point in time. So it wouldn't be appropriate for me to sort of say what those are, because, you know, we're within year and they are live projects, you know, live grant schemes. So
thank you, Vicky.
Could Vicky confirm the report to the last voluntary sector grants committee was an underspend of 137,000 on small grants and 146,000 on the Welsh Church Fund?
I can't comment on that at this particular time. I don't have that information available in front of me. You know, I can by all means look at that. You know, we do, the voluntary sector panel meets 3 times a year, and obviously at those meetings they do get an update on the latest position. Those are public documents, so, you know, the information is there if you want it. I think they last met in June, July, and I think we do to meet again in November. So obviously, you know, public documents will be produced at those times.
I was quoting from the ones presented to that meeting in June.
Okay, if that's what's in those reports, then but they would be, but as I said, that's at a point in time, and obviously, you know, we are receiving applications and making awards all the time with those grants, so that position will have changed at the moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Roger. Do we have any other questions regarding the fund? Can I just ask one small question, Vicky? And I was just wondering, really, who will be on the assessment panel for the grants?
It will be officers, council officers, and obviously it'll go through the internal approval process, the same as other community grants. Because obviously they will need to be that kind of assessment, looking at obviously the detail of the applications and everything else. So that will be a, you know, process that we'll go through internally.
I'm just wondering what role the councillors would have, other than meeting with their community group and sort of acknowledging that grant going in. I wondered if they were involved in any other way, that's all.
As I said, if there were a situation where the grants applied for exceeded the amount of funding available, then obviously we would need to have discussions with the relevant ward members at that point. But obviously, you know, it's difficult, because obviously they potentially have an interest, don't they? Because if it's a group in their ward, then we wouldn't expect them to make a decision on that. However, we will value their input in terms of how, you know, what the priorities are locally. So it's a bit of a difficult kind of balancing act there. But, you know, we would seek to involve, you know, the relevant member should we need to.
Thank you for that. I think, Alison, you jumped in just now.
No, actually, Steve was first, but
sorry, so sorry. My order's not working today. Steve.
I think Alison did pass over to me then, but I did see your hand up before, but I will ask my question first.
Go for it.
No, just really quick. I was just kind of picking up on Lowry's point. I think I'm just going back now, and I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity, because I suppose if the I think the bit that sort of resonated with me now is that this is to be focused on grassroots groups, and that might exclude some organisations then, possibly. Is there a way that we can maybe just sort of, if organisations are pushed back and if there's not an opportunity for them to have this money because they are seen as being maybe not as grassroots as needed, is there a way that maybe there's a way to kind of challenge that afterwards, or is there a way now that we can help to set the criteria of what actually defines as that grassroots before we go too far down the line with it?
The criteria has been, a report on the grant scheme has been taken to Cabinet, and they've signed off the grant scheme as is. So unfortunately, there isn't the opportunity to do that at the moment. However, they have committed to reviewing the grant scheme after 12 months. So if in that 12 months, obviously, there's issues identified, not just obviously what you just raised, but any other issues that might mean that we need to tweak how the grant scheme operates, then we can look to have that discussion at that point in time. We have tried to make it as inclusive as possible. As I said in my presentation, they are going to be those groups that are not going to want to set themselves up as a group, or have a bank account, etc. And that's why we're saying that we'd hope that they would look to work with perhaps more established groups in the community, perhaps become a subgroup of a group already existing in the community, and access the funding in that way. We do, as I said, we do want to make it as inclusive as possible, and obviously, as I said, the support is there for those groups that do want to become sort of constituted and have a bank account, etc. So we hope that as many groups as possible will be able to access this funding.
Okay. Can I just come back in there? Sorry, Chair, just really quick. Yeah, I just think for me though, I think Lowry made a really good point, and in the sense that what I wouldn't want to happen is that there is certain groups that might not be able to carry out some of this really good work on the ground. Yet there's organisations that can do that, and I wouldn't want those organisations to be penalised by not being able to carry out that work just because there's not a group available to do it, if that makes sense. So I just want to know if there was a way that maybe it could be sort of looked at or challenged, at least, just to say, actually, this is a really good piece of work, and just because of the organisation that might be running it, because it might be not seen as grassroots enough, that it doesn't allow that good work.
Yeah, I mean, these sort of things were raised as we were going through the process of developing the scheme, and what we've put in place, we think should cover, most instances. As has been raised by Michelle and Lowry, there are groups that maybe can't, set themselves up or don't want to, or whatever the reason might be, and that's why I've said that I'll go back and have those discussions to see if, a group like Mentor Iaith or the Parent Network could apply on their behalf. But I think the key thing would be that it would need to be very specific, to one particular award, and they'd still have to go through that process of, getting award members, sponsorship of the project and that type of thing. And obviously there may be other competing priorities in the area. So, with all those things in mind, I'll go back and have that discussion.
Thank you. That's lovely, Vicky. Alison, do you still want to come in?
I do. I got a couple of questions. Where will the grant forms?
Can I just say, sorry, I'm just really conscious of the time, because obviously we've got the workshop session as well on the wellbeing assessment that we want to give adequate time to. So I'm not to stop any questions. If anyone wants to contact me after the meeting,
if we can more than the moment, Vicky, because I think there's a couple of really important questions we need.
That's fine.
If it's all right with you, I'll promise
fine.
I will chivvy us along so we don't overlap your workshop. But I think this is quite key at the moment. If we don't iron out some of these, I think we're going to miss the opportunity. Sorry about that. Alison, please.
Yeah, it was just quickly to ask where the grant forms will be available. So are they going to be on the website, or can we have copies of them to circulate?
We like to have a bit of a discussion first, just to make sure that obviously they meet the criteria. So that's why I've said if we can use the inbox, just so that obviously the requests can be channeled through that, and we can have a quick look at them, just to make sure that obviously, I've had one, going back to discussion earlier, I've had one application submitted yesterday, which turned out to be from a business. The councillor was happy to support it, but unfortunately it was a sole trading business, so we can't help them. So, it's just things like that, just to make sure that obviously the criteria is met. And, the last thing we'd want is for a group to sort of put a lot of time and effort into submitting an application and then not meet the eligibility criteria.
Yeah,
so that's why we like to have those kind of.
I get the point, Vicky, but I think that might cause a real bottleneck for you and Hayley. So the thing is that we give out the grant forms and we have discussions with organisations all the time about their applications into various funds and things like that. And if the local councillors are also getting the grant forms anyway, then, you know, they're likely to be giving them to organisations to complete anyway. So it just...
Yeah, I'd be happy for Gavo to have access to forms, not a problem at all. As you say, you know, you're well used to using or to sort of interpreting the grant rules and everything. It's just making them available on a website, I think, is a lot more problematic because
you don't
that's
know
useful
because I mean the thing is we're well used to filtering out local businesses.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah,
we've just been notified of the new Loneliness and Social Isolation Fund, which is coming to local authorities over the next 3 years. Coming to local authorities, but with a caveat in there that they need to work with a local CVC and third sector. I'm not sure whether you would have seen it or not yet. It's about £27,500 a year for the next 3 years. We've already been approached, as it happens, by the Caerphilly Cares team in, you know, in the borough. But I suppose because this is a loneliness and isolation fund, and you've mentioned loneliness and isolation within the criteria for this, my question really is how will the determination of these grants work alongside the other applications, the other grant schemes that are being run, so that we're not getting either multiple bids into, you know, multiple grant schemes, or we're getting bids coming into one scheme that would be better spent in another?
Good question. I'm personally not aware of the grant scheme that you mentioned, so I don't know what the mechanisms are for allocating that funding. So one of the questions that's asked on the application form is if they're seeking funding for that particular project from elsewhere. So if they were potentially making an application to another grant scheme, I'd expect them to be stating that on the form, whatever that grant scheme might be, because obviously, as we know, there are lots of different grant schemes out there. So really, it's a case of them sort of giving all the information about their project that we request.
Thank you, Vicky. That's clear. Alison, can I quickly move on to Kevin and then make Kevin's the last question, please, if that's all right with everyone?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Quite quickly about monitoring and sort of clawback. Obviously, we don't want these small groups disadvantaged, and I'm concerned that, as Alison have said, about people applying and they've already applying for other grant schemes. But what I wanted to ask was about the checks and monitoring process. If you've got a small group with joins with a larger one, and they've got the 50% when it's approved. Now we're waiting then for the invoices and the financial records. What type of monitoring will you have in place, and what type of checks? And if they don't provide the information, will you claw back the original 50% which you've given them on approval? Thank you.
As I said, they will need to provide the evidence that they've spent the money in the way that they stated on the original application. That will be receipts, invoices for things they've bought, purchased, done, and obviously a bank statement showing that money going through a bank account. Obviously, you know, that might be the bank account of a sort of another organisation who are acting on their behalf, but obviously they will need to have those good sort of financial processes in place. And if they've got 18 months in terms of the whole project. So as I said, once they've got that first tranche, we would expect that information to be submitted, and certainly the second tranche of funding wouldn't be submitted until the original evidence was provided. As I said, if they didn't provide any evidence and we've paid them £1,000, then they will be given lots of reminders and asked to provide information. And obviously, if they don't provide that information, then potentially, I'm not saying that we definitely would, but potentially we could reclaim that money. That's where the risk comes in for the authority. As I said, with the other community grants, they're all done in arrears. So this is where we've recognised that this can cause issues, and why we've sort of tried to address it in this way. But there's that, when they are given a grant, there's a set of terms and conditions which they are required to sign, which says things like, if they don't spend the money, we can look to reclaim it. If they spend it on something else, we can look to reclaim it. So, they are required to sign those terms and conditions as part of the grant process. And that is something that we could take up in terms of reclaiming the money. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vicky. Okay, so we'll close that item there. Thank you for putting up with me, Vicky. And I thought it's really important that people don't walk away from this meeting feeling that they didn't have a chance to have their voice heard.
Yeah, that's fine. And like I said, more than happy to deal with any other queries outside the meeting, answer any other questions, speak to any specific groups. Although, as I said, we do expect that elected members would be that kind of conduit as well, because they have to sponsor the project.
No problem. And I think if anyone would like to put any questions in the chat box, we'll collate those as well, and we'll make sure that Vicky gets them so that we can pass those on your behalf. Okay.
I think you're
muted, Michelle.
I'm not going to repeat that then. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the next item. We're going to hand over now to Paul Cook, who's going to be talking to us about the Wellbeing Assessment Workshop. And apologies, Paul, for delaying your joining us.
No, that's okay. It's really useful to have that discussion. No, it's good to hear those views. So, okay, so as all the committee members know, we're in the middle of preparing or undertaking the consultation for the Wellbeing Assessment for the, as we've done in previous rounds. This time round, it'll be consultation for the wellbeing assessment to cover the whole footprint of Gwent, rather than just Caerphilly, because as you also know, we're now moving to a Gwent PSB rather than the Caerphilly PSB. But it still means that we need to understand the issues and the priorities for Caerphilly residents and groups within Caerphilly. So we're undertaking a whole series of consultation events. We're in the middle of those now, so we're holding events in all 5 community plan areas. I think we've held 4 of those already. But we thought it was important, really important, to get the views of this committee and the members of this. So there are other options around sort of doing them online, and we've got all sorts of hard copies going, but we've actually arranged a special consultation event for this committee to be held after this meeting finishes. There were technical issues around doing breakout rooms for this group, and then in terms of how that would then be recorded in minutes and things. So what we've agreed is we'll run a workshop directly after this meeting finishes. So if hopefully members will be able to log off from this one when this one finishes and join the other one, that would be great. The first item did overrun slightly, but I will commit that we will finish by 12:30 for members. So you're probably pleased to know I'll probably cut down my presentation at the beginning of it, and we'll just get straight into the questions. So yeah, so perhaps I wouldn't say any more, but I would really welcome and really encourage people to join, because it's important that we get Caerphilly issues raised into the wellbeing assessment and then into the wellbeing plan. So perhaps I'll leave it there, Michelle, and we can remind people at the end of the meeting just to leave this one and join our workshop, which they should have links to.
Thank you, Paul. That's brilliant. Yes, please do that. And I'll remind you all just before we log off from this one. So thank you very much for that. So moving on to item 6, which is items of interest concerning the voluntary sector from compact partners. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I was feeling that we only had David Llewellyn with us as a compact partner today. I might be wrong, but I know David has been experiencing some technical issues as well. So it's possible that he's no longer with us. No, can't see him coming forward. Do we have any other compact partners that I may have missed? Doesn't look like. Okay. Is there anything that Garva would like to bring to the table before we move on? No, that's cool. So I would say that item number 6, we at the minute don't have any items of interest from the compact partners, because unfortunately, due to technical issues, we don't seem to have any. Okay, so going on, once I close this meeting, just to remind you to join the other meeting, if that's okay. And unless there's anything else that I should bring up, which I am not aware of at the moment, Rebecca, I would close this meeting. Okay, so can I officially close the meeting, and see you all in a minute on the next one. Thank you all very much for your patience with me. I know I can be quite trying. Thank you.